This is the Film File. These are the film geeks. This is the show.
Simple, to the point.
Yeah, I can't say clearer than that. I'm a simple to the point kind of guy today. Hello and welcome. I'm Lee Ford.
And I'm Andy Beacon.
And this is the film show for film geeks by film geeks. And just in case you've not noticed, we're your regular film geeks. Andy.
I'm very regular at the moment.
Are you? And more information than I could dream of, let alone need to know. It's now time for this week's deep dive, in which Andy and I, take a deep dive into classic movies we like. Some of us are talking about movies that we've missed, but neither of us missed this. Came out in 1993. It was one of the early Quentin Tarantino movies to be directed by another director, not by himself. That along with Natural Born Killers. True Romance, directed by Tony Scott, featured an ensemble cast led by Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette, with Dennis Hopper, Val Kilmer, Gary Oldman, Brad Pitt, and, in a scene-stealing move as ever, Christopher Walken. Slater and Arquette portray newlyweds on the run from the mafia after stealing a shipment of drugs. The film, as I said, was an early script by Tarantino, which he would sell the screenplay for the film after the success of his debut feature, Reservoir Dogs. It's regarded by many as a proponent as cross-section of writer and director's respective individual trademarks, including a Southern California setting, pop cultural references galore, ultra-stylized violence, punctuated by Tony Scott's use of slow motion. Even though it was praised by critics, it was a bit of a box office success. Even though it was praised by critics, especially for its dialogue, characters, and offbeat style, the film was initially a box office dud. But positive receptions earned it that cool thing that all great movies should do after they've not found their audience: give it a cult following. It's coming out again for Valentine's Day. Let's talk about True Romance.
I'll insert a trailer with that glorious, glorious Zimmer score.
All right. We'll do the usual. Talk a little bit. We'll talk about the plot.
Yeah.
So I saw this upon its initial release, and all right-minded people did the same and fell in love with it. We fell in love with Alabama and Clarence. We fell in love with the constant pop culture references. We fell in love with Clarence's fascination with Elvis. It had all the best elements of Tarantino. Cool dialogue, pop culture references, of course. Just a great sense of coolness. But it also worked because it had Tony Scott at the top of his game. Tony Scott, for some reason, I think always fell into the shadow of his older brother Ridley, who was more seen the serious filmmaker, while Tony had a tendency to do the more, lighter, throwaway box office movies. But this was a perfect balancing act between Tarantino's style and what would go on to be kind of Tony Scott's erratic film directing style, which he honed with such other films like Domino after this one. In many ways, this is the film that Tarantino should never have made, because I don't think he could have brought anything to the party better than Tony Scott did. It was a sad loss when Tony Scott unfortunately took his own life, but he left a great legacy of work, and boy, did he leave us a great Tarantino movie. He left us True Romance. Love it, absolutely love it. It is, in essence, a cool movie. Andy, I know you agree with me. Please agree with me.
Yeah, I like you. I saw this on its initial cinema release. Me and my housemate and one of my uni buddies, I all went to see it at the same time, and I then watched it another 3 times before it came off the cinemas because I just fell in love with it. Like you say, you fall in love with Slater as Clarence. You fall in love with Arquette as Alabama. You can't help but fall in love with the dialogue because this is a Tarantino dialogue-driven film. There's long, extended discussions about kung fu movies, comic books, pop culture, but it's without that sometimes indulgent streak that overburdens Tarantino, because Tony Scott, in bringing it to the screen, has decided, whilst this bit works, let's stop the speech at that point because it's dragging on a bit. And like you say, Tony Scott's style that he brings to films, it was generally like the generic blockbusters, and he used to go for different like camera trickery, particularly in the latter part of his career after True Romance. But True Romance was where he honed his abilities beautifully to really deliver the story in every manner that it needed to be. It's Clarence, played by Slater, a kung fu loving worker in a comic book store. Let's be honest. We've spoken about comic book movies. We've spoken about our love of kung fu movies. Of course, me and Lee fell in love with this character because he was us. Yeah. He was us. We could relate to every aspect of them, the nervousness around people, the uncertainty, and then he falls in love with Alabama, who he thinks is just a perfect, like, love at first sight, only to find out that she's a call girl that has been hired by his boss. And we all wanted a boss who would hire us a call girl like Alabama. But we all live in the real world. And that's where the story all goes from. And that's when you start getting introduced to the myriad of support characters. Gary Oldman's Drexel is in the film for minutes, mere minutes. But boy, does he throw everything into those minutes. As he's described it, he was presented with the idea of playing a white man who thinks he's a black man dealing drugs. And like, even without seeing the script, Gary Oldman was like, I'm doing that, and signed up there and then. And then you've mentioned Walken's scene stealing. But it's interesting to say that Walken stole his scene as the mob boss. But the scene that he really steals everything from the film from, he's stealing it with the help of Dennis Hopper's character.
Yeah, you need that.
And the pair of them.
You've got to have a great actor playing off that kind of a speech to make it as iconic as it is.
The pair of them sizzling on screen together as it goes through the whole dialogue of the interrogation, then getting flipped round to Hopper regaling Walken's mob boss with the origin story of the Sicilian nationalities, pushing him to the edge to anger him, to kill him, before he can give away any details that he's been interrogated for. And it's a scene that's not just an example of how great Tarantino's writing can be. I mean, Tarantino cites it in interviews as one of his proudest moments of screenwriting. But it's also how Scott's usually flashy direction can rein itself back in and hone in to create a tension in my memories of it always never quite live up to watching it again. But it's just basically those two presences in a darkened room. And it's intense and it builds like a distant rumble of thunder. It's beautifully shot. It's marvelously crafted. And the whole film, you get to that point in the film and you realise you're not just watching a throwaway piece of entertainment. You're watching something special.
I think you're right. I mean, it is, as I said earlier, that the savvy script work of Tarantino with Tony Scott at the top of his game. And initially, as you know, Tarantino produced a lot of scripts that still haven't been made that he intended to direct, and he intended to direct this one. If you ever get a chance to read the original Tarantino version of this, the original script, he does it non-linear. It's choppy, it's all over the place, and kind of works. There was a rumor that he wasn't happy and opposed Tony Scott's decision to change the ending, which Scott maintained was his own volition, not the studio, saying he just fell in love with those two characters and didn't want to see them die, as one of the characters doesn't make it at the end of the original script. So Tarantino kind of went along with it and now believes it to be a great film. And Scott just brought a beauty to it, a style to it that I don't think Tarantino would have had as a filmmaker way back then. As you said, it's beautifully composed, looks great, has all the right elements. It captures that essence of Hollywood where the film goes towards the end. It's vibrant. It's a bit grisly in places. It's got a little bit of a throwback to Badlands, and it's got the kind of road movie element to it. It just works, and it's one of those perfect little films. And it is a little film to a degree. One of those where everything just fits together absolutely perfectly, and in the right components, in the right place, with the right cast. And those who've seen it just love it and continue to love
it. For those who are out there who are Quentin Tarantino aficionados, you will notice when you're watching this film that there are links to the overall Tarantino verse abound throughout the film. Even though Quentin didn't direct it himself, you've got Lee Donowitz, played by Saul Rubinek, marvelously played by Saul Rubinek.
Who's like basically playing Paul Silver, by the way.
Yeah. Who's the grandson of Sergeant Donnie Donowitz from Inglourious Bastards. And in Reservoir Dogs, Mr. White refers to a girl he worked with called Alabama, and that's the Alabama of this story. Because Tarantino likes to seed little continuity links between all of his films. Everything is linked in one way or another. And this was no exception, even though someone else made it. I mean, even the other Tarantino screenplay that made it into another director's hand around about the same time, Natural Born Killers, has those links to the overall Tarantino verse with names of characters being referenced. Whereas Natural Born Killers, that was turned into a hyperactive satire of media obsession by Oliver Stone, and I think doesn't quite gel as well as True Romance does as a result.
Yeah, I'll agree. I mean, I think it's worth at some point in a future show talking about Natural Born Killers. You've got to talk about True Romance and mention the cast, because we talked about the top layer cast, but you've also got Brad Pitt in this as a stoner, and you've got in a brief role, but boy, he comes in like a truck. James Gandolfini, pre The Sopranos, who's just absolutely amazing, vicious and sadistic, and yet we understand what this character's about, and that to some extent he's got heart. For somebody as like a lot of this cast are on screen for a very short amount of time, like Gary Oldman, they make the characters their own, and I don't know whether that's down to the writing or it's down to Tony Scott giving them the ability to really stand out. I can't wait to see this again on the big screen, because I think it is, while I've seen it on TV and I've seen it on DVD, it's a big screen movie. It's a joyous occasion when you get to see it on the screen, because it's vibrant. It's not a dark looking movie for a dark subject. It's a bright film and needs to be seen on the biggest screen possible.
We need to mention, before we round off this love of True Romance, the score by Zimmer.
Yes, but again,
very different.
Back to Badlands again, where he takes one of the themes from Badlands.
It's a beautiful score. It's catchy. It sticks in your head. And even as I'm talking about it now, I can hear it playing in my mind. It's one of my favourite Zimmer scores. I'm not normally a lover of Zimmer's scores. I find some of them are overblown, a bit too, I don't know,
bombastic,
rambunctious. Yeah. But when it comes to things like this and the recent Dune score, he does something so creative and so different, but that fits well with the story that's being told, that he just shows me why his name is so present across so many films. Yeah. Absolutely marvellous score. It's one of those score soundtracks that is worth purchasing and re-listening to.
Yeah.
Great film. I rewatched it on Blu-ray last week in preparation for the show. I really do want to watch it on the big screen again,
Don't blame
and I feel that I might find an excuse to do so with the limited release that it's got over this next week.
So, as Andy said, you can catch it at the cinema, but you can also pick it up as a 2-disc DVD and Blu-ray set.
Yes.
That's true romance.
I'm going to be talking, first of all, I'll start off with Moonfall, shall I?
Why not? I kind of had the intentions to want to see this, and as more and more trailers got released, I kind of didn't. I got a bit of a love-hate relationship with Roland Emmerich. He is this generation's Irwin Allen. For those who don't know for those who don't know who Irwin Allen is, shame on you. But he was seen as the master of disaster and did big-budget disaster movies. I think Roland Emmerich, for me, is the kind of guy who comes up with a great idea but can't see it through and pads out all of his films. And he pads them out with usually melodrama. So you get a great idea. And I'm also looking at you, Independence Day and Stargate. They are a great first act because, boy, he throws everything at you for that first act. Middle act is usually melodrama and then comes back with an interesting finale. Not all the time, but that's kind of his shtick. He makes trash, and he makes admirable trash, and we all love a great bit of trash. He knows how to throw spectacle on the screen. I just don't think he's a great storyteller. And from what I've seen about Moonfall, Andy, am I right? Is this trash?
Yes.
Okay, moving on.